Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast. We have made it through 8 rounds of the 2025 AFL season, 8 3/4 if you count opening round. Well, we had Star Wars Day yesterday, Liam, with May the 4th. Next week, we're going to have Harry Potter round with 9 3/4 of the round done. Isn't that exciting? How are you?
Good, man. I feel like you've been saving that since literally round 3, I think. I remember you mentioned it early on in one of the episodes earlier on, Harry Potter round. It's finally here, Jesse. You're excited for it, aren't you? Do you think, hopefully, we get some football magic, unlike we got this week? It was very much a, what's a Star Wars reference, Jesse? Have you seen Star Wars? I haven't seen it. No.
I know that May the 4th is like, May the Force be with you.
I know that. I was just hoping this, like, is there a bad thing that can replicate how bad this round of football was?
Well, we did have some magic this round, if the magic was performed by a wizard who was useless and was also dead for most of the round, I think, because it wasn't pretty, I think, for a lot of the week. But, crucially, I think some teams that really needed to get 4 points on the board, either to affirm themselves in that top portion ladder or to get themselves going a bit this season, they really found that. So we'll go through the games a bit later on, but we do have a bit of news to cover off before we do that, though.
Yeah, come on, mate.
You jumped in too early, though. I had that under control.
Apologies.
I was playing my role, and you can play your role by following us at CM Perfect on Instagram. You can catch this podcast on Apple, Amazon, or Spotify. Of course, you can also get us on YouTube, where we do like to cut the episode in half, like a birthday cake. Although probably more than 2 pieces for a birthday cake. But if it's a small cake, or you really like cake,
Jesse. Not when I'm eating it. 2 pieces. That's it.
So you take the share platter challenge very seriously, do you, Len?
I do, very much so.
Well, you don't have to share the Centimetre Perfect AFL podcast with anyone if you don't want to.
That's true.
You can, and we'll talk about who you can share that to at the end of the episode when I do my little sign-off. But you can also catch all the highlights on YouTube, where we split it into the news and the deep dives, and then, of course, our games review. And I guess it's almost in 3 parts now on YouTube, Liam.
Yeah.
Because the sequel to the prequel is just the tips, which is our weekly tipping show, where we do battle in a bit of a twist on the normal AFL tipping competition.
That's right. I'm not going to talk about that this week. I'm getting pantsed in that competition. It's my word for this season. I'm being pantsed at the moment, but we'll talk about that later. That's fine. Jesse, lots to talk about today. Obviously, we've got your deep dive to go into. I'm coming into this episode as a bit of a listener myself, because we've got some news to talk about. Most of the stuff that you've told me that's happened, and I'm like, has it now? So you're going to go through and tell me about it, and I will provide my thoughts and feedback. Jesse, where do you want to start?
The power of Twitter. You can catch up with a look at Tom Morris's account in about 5 minutes, and you've got every story going on in the AFL landscape in that time. Look, we'll start with Willie Rioli. Okay. And Willie Rioli has made some inflammatory comments after the Western Bulldogs Port Adelaide game on Saturday, directed at Bailey Dale, who he did have a bit of a continuing fracas with throughout that game. It was quite antisocial between those two. And Tom Morris, of course, because who else would it be these days, has reported that Willie Rioli texted an unnamed Western Bulldogs teammate of Dale, words to the effect of, Bailey Dale better watch out for himself in Darwin and not leave the hotel because I know people up there. Now,
okay.
First of all, I know people in Darwin too, Willie. You're not that special. But I just want to talk about this because he's not facing any punishment from Port Adelaide for this or from the AFL, which I find a bit concerning because that's pretty clearly a threat, Liam. It's a threat to what is broadly a work colleague. You're under the same EBA here.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure this is something that should be going unsanctioned, in my view.
Well, he's had a bit of a time for it lately, hasn't he, Willie? He's had the mentioning of despising Hawthorn a couple of weeks ago, if not last week. So he's on a bit of a roll. Look, as for the punishment side of things, I think it depends on how it's been handled by the clubs themselves. I'm all for the clubs having a chance to actually sort it out between them and the men, the adults that are in that situation, sorting it out amongst themselves first. I mean, your point is taken, though, in the sense that if I was to do this to one of my work colleagues, I'd be instantly shown the door. Different kettle of fish altogether. If they've hashed it out, which from the brief article I've read, sounds like they may have done. It sounds like Willie has called Bailey Dale and said, yeah, that was a bit out of line. Apologies, Bailey. I'll make sure my friends don't come pay you a visit. It's if that's how it's been sorted out, I'm like, okay, well, what more needs to be done? I suppose. Like, what would you suggest, Jesse?
Well, I think you should be getting weeks, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Now, to be clear before I start this, I'm not equivocating these two on equal footing. Okay, this is not the same issue, but broadly, I think it comes under the same umbrella. Now, the AFL has stepped in when players have been confirmed as making racist, homophobic, otherwise inappropriate remarks to other players in an on-field setting. Now, there's a few key differences here, obviously, off-field and not racist or homophobic in nature based on what we've been informed of. But the AFL has clearly shown a willingness to step in when inappropriate remarks, deeply inappropriate remarks are made. I understand this isn't the same, but this is still, in my view, a deeply inappropriate remark.
Sure. I mean, it is. But how much of it do you reckon is, I guess the delineation between those two things, like you've just mentioned, is that the other one is derogatory. This one's a bit of, dick swinging.
But this this is after the game, and he's gone out of his way to make a threat to an opposition player.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because I see what you're saying, because you don't want to have this in the game. You don't want to have some players thinking that they've got carte blanche just to go and threaten their other opposition teammates into whatever. But also, I guess it comes down to the fact as well, like, does this open up people in Darwin who are fans of Willie Rioli to take this under their own wing and be like, well, Willie's said that this on a tweet, or we've got word of this, that Willie wants us to go and do something. Will they just act on it anyway? Is that
not.
Well, of course not. But like, some people aren't haven't got that common sense, that social common sense, let's say, and might see this as permission in a certain sense. Hopefully not. Absolutely, hopefully not. But I can see that's where the danger comes in with these kinds of texts and these texts getting out. I mean, I don't know why he would send it to a teammate of Bailey Dale, because obviously the teammate of Bailey Dale is just going to be like, here's a message I got. He's not going to keep it to himself, is he? Not very smart.
Well, I've seen the whole point was to pass it on to Bailey Dale. So either Willie Rioli's Instagram was deactivated after his Hawthorn comments, or he just doesn't have Bailey Dale's number.
Yeah.
And look, that may be upsetting for Willie, that he can't just shoot Bailey a text.
Maybe he sent Bailey a text and just left him on red. That's frustrating. That's one of those frustrating things, yeah. So now he had to get in touch with somebody else. I don't know, Jesse.
But no, again, obviously, it's not the same as, a deeply offensive, racist, homophobic, sexist. It's not that level.
Yeah, sure.
You get penalties up to, 5-6 weeks for those comments. I don't think you can look at that and then look at this and say, there's a 5-week difference here. There's a clear difference.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing we talk about in the tribunal in the on-field sense. There's just such a broad delineation in the AFL at the moment between what is a serious offence and what is objectively an offence to a degree in terms of, it's in that ballpark, and then it's getting nothing.
Yeah. And I guess it's not like he didn't have priors. He had a record of it just recently. So he's been told twice now in the space of as many weeks to maybe cool the jets on the old text messaging. So maybe, who knows, for third strike, maybe we'll see them step in. But it's a good point to raise, Jesse. I'm sure it's going to be a good conversation point for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people would just have that kind of idea of, well, just a bit of mud shit slinging, not really serious.
How often do we see players reposting horrific abuse they get?
Oh yeah,
regarding performance. You cost me this. You cost me that. You're bad. Rah rah rah. Like, abuse is obviously crossing the line.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if I like just no action being taken on this at all, seemingly, as a precedent to move forward. And then I don't want us to be in a situation where something similar happens. Maybe not exactly the same, but you get a similar area, and then there's a big overreaction because it happened previously, and then that just adds to more confusion. Because why was it okay here but not here? Or what's the difference here? This seems worse than this one.
Oh, it's how the AFL deals with things. Some things are 3 weeks, some things aren't. It's just how they work. Depends where the wind is taking them. What's hot that day? What's the trend? What are people talking about when it comes to the issues? I mean, it's how they umpire. You know, there was a talk before the start of this round saying they were going to watch the stand rule because people were creeping over the line. So then they're hot on that. It changes week to week. Do you know what I mean? Like there seems to be like a flavor of the week. And hey, maybe the next person who does this might be on the receiving end because it's the flavor that week. Who knows? Interesting conversation though, Jesse. Anything else to add on that before we move on to the next topic?
No, but we'll stick with text messaging here for our next topic. So Caleb Sarong revealed today at a press conference at Fremantle that for a shocking 61-point loss to St Kilda on Friday night, that he texted Justin Longmuir confirming that he has the star midfielder's full support as the season develops. This also comes off the back of Simon Garlick unequivocally declaring Justin Longmuir will be in the chair come round 0 or round 1, depending on when Fremantle start in 2026. Maybe old Simon looking for a technicality there, sacking after opening round. But very interesting here. We'll talk about Garlick first.
Okay.
Because these comments certainly caught my eye after the game. I wasn't made aware of these comments until after the game, which obviously does alter perception.
Sure.
But I have to say, you're asking for trouble, aren't you?
Yeah.
Going into a must-win game, on shaky ground, I feel, guaranteeing a coach's future on the record on a pretty big broadcasting service. It's not like you've gone on to, Kalgoorlie Regional FM on the Tuesday graveyard shift and said this. You've said on like ABC Sport in the Friday night pre-game coverage. There's not a population of 0 that's listening to that.
Sure.
You're asking for trouble here, aren't you?
I mean, you are, but also, I mean, this fits with what he's been saying he's given him a contract, not once, but twice now, extensions. Obviously, one is a contract, one is the employee arrangement for next year, before seeing results. So it's obviously clear in his head that he knows what he's doing in terms of he knows what he's doing. Whether or not he knows what he's doing, well that's to be seen. But in Simon Garlick's head, he's sticking it out. It's almost as if he's forgotten that J-Lo's been there for 5.5 years. It's like, no, he's a new coach. No, the fans are starting to work it out too.
Yeah, they're only joining me on that core flute about 3.5 years too late.
Yep, that's true.
Oh no, he's actually not who he promised he was.
Yeah, I mean, you had a big piece on the strategic plan of Simon Garlick a few weeks ago, and I think.
Oh,
hello, you're back, Jesse. I lost you for a second there.
Yeah, you started talking about Justin Longmuir, and the rage actually shut down the computer.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you.
What was I talking about? What was my train of thought?
You were talking about the strategic plan bit we did a couple of years ago, which you should check out on YouTube if you haven't already.
Yes, because it goes to show like the mindset of where Simon Garlick started all this, how it's gone, and obviously the fact that he, much like his coach, isn't willing to change anything. It's like it just is par for the course. He's giving this. What were his words? He's like, who is he doing? Who's actually? My mind is going. I'm a wild right now because it was Mick Malthouse there.
Mick was in there, yeah, and so he was very keen to push the point about, well, Mick, you didn't have an ongoing employee agreement. Justin does,
right? But wasn't he making a bunch of other coaching comparisons to Mick Malthouse as well?
Yeah, so he made the comparison that it did take Malthouse a while to get going as a senior coach, which is fine. But I think you've also got to remember contextually, it's a very different environment back then. Mm-hmm. You're talking Malthouse starting his career in the 1980s. I don't believe Footscray was his first senior coaching gig. It's a completely different context. Footscray at the time, was a poor club. West Coast was obviously a huge success for Malthouse. No one's going to deny that. And then he gets the biggest job in the country in Collingwood. And, objectively, doesn't really deliver until very late in the piece.
Yeah.
There, probably should have gotten a grand final in the middle of that Brisbane dynasty. I know it's easier said than done, but I get the sense that, yes, Malthouse is a phenomenal coach, and no one's going to argue that. But I just find the comparison a bit odd. Oh, it took you a while, so therefore Justin's going to be just as good as you as a senior coach. Well, no.
Well, I'm guessing Mick showed some progress during his time working up.
But Malthouse also coached in 4 different decades: the 80s, sure. The 90s, the noughties, the 2010s. That's the ability to adapt. What adaptation has anyone seen from Justin Longmuir in almost 5.5 years?
That's the question. I mean, I get Caleb texting him saying he's got my support because, you know, at the end of the day, he's still the coach at the moment, right? So the players need to be showing that they've got support for their coach. I understand that to an extent, and also, what else they're going to do right now? Like they can't just bring someone in right now, can they? Potentially, I'm not too sure. But for the time being, I think the players have no real other choice than to support Justin. That's just how it is. But hearing Simon Garlick being like, "Yep, no matter what happens this year, no matter what, he's still there next year," it's a bit of a concern. It's a little bit of a slap in the face to the fans a little bit.
Would you expect any other club to make that type of comment?
No.
If they're in Fremantle's position right now, in terms of the list quality,
nope.
The contextual history of the football club,
nope.
You wouldn't hear it.
No. I think it goes to show where the culture is kind of at behind the scenes, though, at Freo.
Yeah.
I think it goes to show there's no, we won't go on too much about this because there's much more to speak about this game later on.
Yeah, and we will get to that.
We'll get to that. But you can see that Justin has no fire. He has no passion. The one game where apparently he gave fire and passion, which was before the Adelaide game, they won once. Like, we obviously don't see everything that goes on behind the scenes with Justin and the Freo Footy Club.
Can I make a point on that, though?
You may.
Because if you actually look statistically at the Fremantle Adelaide game, nothing really changed from that game versus the 6 others they've played this year. Yeah, it's the best result.
Statistically, probably not, but there was a drive there that hasn't been there for most of the rest of the season.
But then is having that what once every 7 games seriously the best that the football club can do? Like, really?
Yeah. No, it's an interesting comment from Simon to make, and I think now that the fans are starting to see that after, and this is before the game, obviously, but after the game, getting those comments in hindsight, I think a lot of fans now are like, wake up.
But it's just not a smart comment for a senior executive to go and put yourself in that situation. Like, I think I said this to you. You are asking for trouble.
Yeah.
To go out there before such an important game. Well, yeah, you get to a prelim final, you crash out, unluckily. You say, yeah, we're back in the coach. We'll go ahead. We'll push ahead. But to make this comment in round 8?
Yeah.
Before a game where you've got a 4-3 record and you've had disappointing losses on 3 occasions, or certainly 1 flogging and 2 very disappointing losses to Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah.
And this is the comment you're going with?
Back him in for the rest of the season. I'm all about that. Say, look, here, we're going to give him to the end of the season. We'll back him in, see what he can do. Don't give it next year already. I agree with you, Jesse. I think it's a bit too, what's the word? Encouraging. No.
It's presumptive. It's presumptive that results are going to match the list profile. And, I think I'm pretty comfortable with the record with saying this.
I don't think he cares if the record, by the sounds of it, doesn't care if we finish.
Well, that comment makes you think we could finish last. And it wouldn't matter.
Wouldn't matter.
He said it on the record on Friday night in front of what I can only assume is tens of thousands, if not 100,000 listeners. Plus, you get your reshares on social media. The clip does the rounds. We talk about it here. The word of mouth gets going. I don't understand why you'd make that comment so publicly before such an important game. And yeah, it's easy to say in hindsight when the result goes pear-shaped, but don't put yourself in that position.
Yeah, 100%. We'll move on, Jesse. Otherwise, we'll get talking on that for ages as we normally do. Let's move on. Now, you want to go into a bit of a deep dive on your points. Now,
I do.
I'll let you explain it. I'm not too sure if I have to set a little clock for you, how long we're going to go. But let's keep this nice.
It'll be compact.
Compact?
Nice and compact.
Wonderful. All right, let's. So, Jesse, what are we talking about? I have no idea.
So we've made it through 8 rounds of the season. Most clubs have played the allotment of games. Some have played a little bit less, like Essendon and Gold Coast. So I wanted to take a look at how the teams are actually performing on the scoreboard and focus on a kind of divide in these games. So I wanted to talk about times that teams have scored less than 60 points and times that teams have scored more than 90 points. And I think it paints a pretty interesting picture as to where some of these teams are at in this season at the moment. So we'll start alphabetically with Adelaide. Sure. So they've scored less than 60 points on 1 occasion, which was that terrible game against the Giants. They've scored more than 90 points on 6 different occasions.
It's pretty big.
It's very big. And I think it really goes to show that they are, if you can score 90 points in 6 games out of 8, you're going to be in a good place. They've lost games where I think they scored 90 exactly against Gold Coast. They scored 100 against Geelong and still lost. But they're putting themselves in winning positions with these scores. Have you noticed that in terms of attacking output, Liam, with the Crows this year?
Yeah, with the Crows especially. Like every time I feel we talk about their games, I've lauded their front, the big marking targets up forward, like Fogarty. You got Thilthorpe, Riley. You got Tex, winding back the clock a little bit this year. And then you got like Keys, and everyone's doing their bit. Like it seems to be an all round forward structure and forward performance from the Crows this year. And this obviously clearly shows it with these results. The one other game I'm guessing was the one against Freo where they scored 65 or something. But no, they're formidable going forward, and you can see that this year as well. Like if they're going up forward, it's really hard to stop them. And set shots, which has been a big issue for a lot of teams this year. We've said this many times. Fogarty, no, I don't care where he's standing on that pitch.
Automatic.
I'm trusting him to put that through the middle for sure every time. Tex is still going good. Riley's still going good. Look, hard to complain about the Crows, Jesse.
Brisbane next.
Brizzy.
They've scored under 60 points on one occasion and over 90 points on 4 occasions. And what we're starting to see when we get a bit of separation here is you're looking at sides who are putting themselves in really good positions to win games of football. And I think Brisbane clearly fall into that bracket.
Sure.
But what I'm most impressed about the Lions is, so they've had 8 games, they've scored 90 points in 4 of those. There was big question marks coming in to season 2025 about how Brisbane would go with life after Joe Danaher. They didn't get a big fish in the trade period or free agency to go and fill that role. Oscar Allen's been the talk of the town in terms of, is he going to go there for season 2026 and beyond? But right now, unconventionally, and I really saw this in the Q Clash last night, in a low-scoring game, admittedly, but they're really getting good at guys like Archie.
Yeah.
Just elevating to that consistent ability to score goals. I love the way their midfield's getting involved in attacking play as well. Not necessarily scoreboard play, but very much the way they're driving themselves physically into that attacking 50. Dunkley's really good for this. Mm-hmm. Just pushes up and just makes it harder for opposition teams to get out. When you got guys like Charlie Cameron in that, so Zach Bailey is where you can throw in this bracket too. When you got guys like Bailey, Cameron, Archie, who are just excellent tight finishers and can make things happen, if you've got numbers in that area, things are going to happen for you. And I think we're seeing that with the Lions. They're not scoring 90 points every week, like an Adelaide are, just about every week for them. But what they're doing is they're finding winning positions. And with an unconventional forward line, that seems to be working for them.
I think Hipwood's having a better year this year as well than he's had in the past, which is good. Because there was a bit of concerns about him a couple of years ago. But
I think Hipwood really benefits from being the alpha dog in the forward line. You look at Carlton, and we'll talk about them in a second, but they've got probably 2 alpha dogs in their forward line, and that doesn't always work when you've got 2 clear me guys in that forward line. Hipwood's benefiting now from being able to flourish and getting out of that support role and taking on more of that responsibility. So where does Oscar Allen land in all this if he does end up moving to the land of humidity and Brisbane rivers with bull sharks in them for season 22? I suppose our river has bull sharks, so not really a big change.
Not really a big change at all. Not at all. Let's move on, Jesse, to the next team. But Carlton.
3 under 60, 3 over 90 for Carlton. I think this really does paint a good picture, though, of the Blues this year, because we've seen some excellent football. We've seen football that denies Geelong in spectacular fashion. We saw them absolutely dominate North Melbourne in very comfortable fashion. And we've seen games like the Crows game on Saturday where they were comfortably handled, never really in the fight after half-time. They've played some really disappointing performances across the year. Richmond, I think, to be clear, it's 60 or under and 90 or over. So I think they scored exactly 60 points against the Tigers. It was very close to that. So that gets bracketed into here. But you look at games like that, they shouldn't be throwing games to Richmond and barely scraping over 10 goals, or not really even scraping over 10 goals. So I think this does paint a nice picture for Carlton. And I think when you look at a lot of these numbers and the differences, you really say, yeah, this is an accurate reflection. And there's not many here to say, except for maybe 1 or 2, that you say, wow, they're really, what's going on? Because the scoreboard's not reflecting on the ladder. But Carlton, right now, very inconsistent, and that's showing on field.
Like the dictionary definition of sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. That is very Carlton this year for sure. Shall we move on, Jesse?
Let's.
All right.
Collingwood, once under 60 points. Now, interestingly, that was opening round.
Ah.
So they've gone 4 of the next 7 above 90 points. Defeated some good sides in that time as well. Thumped Brisbane. So that's always a good result. When you keep a team under 60 and score over 90 yourself, you do that 8-9 times a year, plus sprinkling some other wins. You're probably good enough to be looking at something like 15, 16 wins across the season. So Collingwood are getting the job done at both ends at the moment. And we could talk about defence maybe next week or down the track as well and split it to a similar metric for how teams are defending this season. But I wanted to talk about attacking output today because Collingwood, they're not as high as a couple of teams that we'll talk about today in terms of games over 90 points, but they're efficient.
Yeah.
And their efficiency with the ball inside attacking 50 and the way they're able to get guys like Membry, Jamie Elliott, Bobby Hill, they've got so many different options in that forward 50. And when you have a forward line, it's an options forward line rather than a direct single focus forward line. That really does help. And you can get different output from different guys at different times and get your results and start pushing in. 4 of your last 7 games above 90 points. That's the type of role you want to be on.
100%. They're scary, the Magpies. Every time I watch them, just like every time they push forward, they always find a way to get on the boot somehow, some way. So, and this reflects that. I mean, exactly half your games over 90 points it's pretty rad. It's pretty rad. And actually, it makes Adelaide stand out just that little bit extra, I find. Like, if you've got the Magpies, who obviously contenders this year, and Adelaide are as well, but Mags have only dropped 2 this year, only scored over 94 times. See what happens. All right, let's go. Jesse.
Essendon, over no games under 60 points, so good work from the Bombers in that regard. Over 90 points twice. And when you look at the Bombers' draw, you're almost a bit disappointed with that because they've had West Coast in there. They've had North Melbourne in there. That's 2 teams who are probably bottom 4. Now, it's pretty clear on this podcast that Essendon are not teams that we have high expectations of in season 2025. But you've got to be putting those teams away. And with the draw the Bombers have had, for them not to have really done that this season, they're relying on scrappy close games. They've picked up wins that way against West Coast and against North. So that's working for them. But we've talked about the Essendon ceiling a lot this year, Liam, where they can play at 10 out of 10, but it probably only takes a 7 out of 10 from a side better than them to beat them. And I think we really saw that laid bare on Thursday night against North Melbourne. Essendon going pretty close to their best. North going pretty close to their best. And Essendon scraping over the line. Is that a reflection of where the Bombers are this year?
Well, what have they got up forward? Like, this is one of the teams...
Peter Wright.
That's it, right? And then everyone else is just kind of chipping in where they can.
Langford's back. That's good.
Yeah.
Kako's lively, but you can't be relying on kids to score your goals.
No,
in this day and age.
Kako's more a creator than a scorer so far this year, I find. Like, he's obviously in there, and it's kind of like a Dudley-esque, another new fella from Freo, in the fact that you might not expect them to kick that many, but they're in the contest and they're creating opportunities and chances. I feel like that's where Kako's kind of sitting. Like, I think he's got like 3 or 4 goals for the year, which is fine, but he's giving it a crack. But yeah, there's another team that played this week as well. Actually, I won't do that, Jesse, because I might spoil what you're going to talk about. Anything else for the Bombers, mate?
No.
Good. Fremantle.
Now, this number actually surprised me, and I watch Fremantle every week. 1 game under 60 points. Gee, can you guess which one that's going to be? And 4 games over 90 points. Now, I think this raised a really interesting conundrum with Fremantle for me because there's plenty of talk that the Fremantle are boring. Boring in terms of their football style. I don't necessarily disagree with that.
Sure.
Having sat through now a decade of defensive football, almost a decade and a half of defensive football from Fremantle now, and the injury crisis in 2011 didn't help either. So, look, here's my question to you, Liam.
Okay.
How much is the game plan holding Fremantle back? Because the ability to score is there.
Yep.
They're not an impotent forward line, to borrow David King from last week. They're not impotent in terms of their forward line. They can score.
Yeah.
But they're not.
They're not.
When it really matters.
Well, I mean, to be fair, same as Collingwood, number of games over 90 points.
Yes, exactly.
But where's the difference then in terms of wins on the board? Is it the forward end or is it the back end? Is it the midfield? Because like you said, like the game plan probably isn't helping. But that to me, just on numbers alone, shows that we're scoring just fine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if we're just talking from a purely points perspective, then yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to argue that the plan is working. Because if you just look at this number in a vacuum, you're like, well, obviously they've got good firepower, they've got good forwards, which we do. But where else is it not translating?
So all that's great, Liam. But here's the names for you.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
West Coast.
Yeah.
Richmond.
Mm-hmm.
Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
That's 3 of the 4.
Ah, okay.
Rubbish. Mostly rubbish.
Yeah.
They've won 3 in a row, but they're still pretty rubbish.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and they lost that game too.
Yeah, exactly. The other one was the Dogs in what? Sorry, no, the one was the Crows. Sorry, in a game that I still think was played. You talk about vacuums. I think that was played in a Hoover.
Yeah.
In the wider context of things.
Can't even give it a Dyson, can you? No. Well, that puts things into perspective for sure. But look, the scoring is there, Jesse. Like, we've got a really good forward line, a really good young forward line. But I don't know, just the bomb and long approach only works against those teams, doesn't it? Doesn't really work against anybody else. And that's what's showing us up a lot this season, that's for sure. Anyway, anything else, Jesse, on the Dockers?
I reckon let's move on, because the Cats have been doing some good things up forward this year. 4 games where they've scored over 90 points, none where they've scored under 60. And I think this really is a great stat to say everything we need to know about Geelong.
Yeah.
They come in, you know, you're not going to get many games where they're going to score under, say, 12 goals, so 72 points flat, and then chuck in a few more for misses. So you're looking, and they were very efficient too on Saturday night as well.
Oh, they're always so efficient though.
They're calling it an airport of football teams, the Geelong Cats. They sure are. But no, I think this is a good way to really delineate how you can have slip-up games, like the St Kilda game, like the Carlton game. But if you're able to just churn out consistent output, you only need to be a B-plus team consistently to get yourself 14 wins. If you happen to hit form at the right time of year, you're where you need to be. And with numbers like this, if you're able to just consistently score against a wide variety of opposition quality and depth and game styles, you're going to give yourself a chance to just about anyone. I think these numbers here for Geelong, 8 games into the season, no games below 10 goals on the scoreboard. That's where you need to be. That's a third of the way through the season. You're doing well in that regard.
Well, I mean, outside your key forwards, you've got all your mids kicking in as well, like always.
And your smalls.
And your smalls. Myers, Holmes, heckin', what's big fella's name? Neil. Stengel. Cameron's in there as well. Manor, he's good for a goal or two.
They're underrated, aren't they? Like you rattle off those names and you think, they are really good.
It's so funny. Every year we say, I feel like we always go, oh, the Cats are going to slide. We always know they're a really good team, but yet somehow they are still underrated. It's such a weird, like...
I refuse to let it happen anymore. This podcast is going to sound like we're Geelong fans, but because they're just that good.
We're footy fans, Jesse. We're footy fans. We're fans of good footy. Boy, howdy, did they say football on the weekend. All right, let's move on to the next team.
Gold Coast are under 60 once. I believe that was the Richmond game off the top of my head. Which was there's your Dyson, and over 90 points on 5 occasions so far. Now, keep in mind, they've only played the 7 games. Actually, no, sorry. Where are my manners, Liam? That one game under 60 points was less than 24 hours ago.
Yes,
that was in the
It was the Brisbane
in a wet, slippery game against what I think is fair to say is a clear contender. So, 7 games, one less than everyone else by Essendon, who we didn't mention when we talked about them. So they've only had the 7 games too. They're pretty good numbers, and I think it really goes to show that this Gold Coast forward line, so King, Walter, these guys were able to just fly and consistently get themselves involved, and you're getting Smalls involved as well. Long, it's a good team, Liam, and they're starting to really find their feet in front of goal.
They are, and I think this is one of the parts of the Suns that you look back on the history, and it's just low scoring smashings all the way through. They're piecing it together this year, and it's really nice to see. I chucked a cheeky tip on them this week. Misguided, but because I'm liking...
No, it wasn't a bad tip. I'll defend you on that. It wasn't a bad tip because that was a knife's edge game.
It was, but no, it's something's changed with the Suns this year. Hardwick's doing some good stuff.
Has the sun risen?
The sun has risen, Jesse. sunrise, sunset, sunrise again, and they can kick goals and they can score, and it's exciting to watch them. And being second so far on the list of scores over 90 points for the entire year with a game in hand, I mean, that's saying some good things. And hopefully they keep this up so they can get themselves a finals berth. It's been a minute. Oop. Shall we move on?
Yeah, that's Giants, 1 game under 60 points. That was the aforementioned wind and rain spectacle at the Adelaide Oval against the Crows. 3 games above 90 points. The Giants have been the biggest sliders, I think, in the last month of football.
Yeah,
and there's been a couple of teams that have really had torpedoes put through their reputations in the last month, but I would put the Giants top of that list. Worrying signs. On paper, this forward line should be dominating.
Yeah.
You're getting 3 out of 8 games above 90 points. You talk about Hogan, Stringer, Callahan, Toby Green. That's not really marrying up to me.
No. I feel like Jesse kind of came out the guns blazing, out the gates blazing, and has kind of just disappeared the last few weeks. I know he was off for 1 or 2 of those weeks, I think.
He has had an interrupted year with injury, Hogan. He missed the start of the year as well. So it's not been perfect for Hogan.
Sure.
But good teams are defined by their ability to pick up, and it's not like Toby Green and Jake Stringer are crap forwards.
True. Well, Stringer hasn't had his kicking boots on this year, that's for sure. He's been spraying them left and right.
Well, he was sub on Sunday. It actually worked too because he came on and changed the game for the Giants.
He did. Yeah, it's a funny one, the Giants. Like you said, on paper, they should be kicking hundreds. Hundreds, Jesse. That's all right. They should be kicking hundreds of points every week. I'm talking 30 goals. Yeah, hundreds and thousands.
Like when he set the new AFL video game to the easiest difficulty and just obliterate St Kilda over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, is that what you did after the game on the weekend, Jesse?
Yeah,
just to get some
dust off
recompense.
AFL Premiership 2007. I wonder if the new game's going to be better than the one they released 18 years ago.
Almost certainly not.
Yeah,
they don't tend to be, Jesse. They don't tend to be.
No.
Anything else you'd like to add for the Giants before we move on?
No, let's talk Hawks.
Talks. Go for it.
Talk Hawks. 0 games under 60 points for Hawthorn this year. 4 games over 90 points. What I like about Hawthorn is when you think about Hawthorn, you actually probably think they'd be a little bit higher in this regard. Maybe 5, maybe even 6 because of their reputation. But I think the Hawks have done it in a very similar way to the Pies this year, where my big Shoal's been able to drift in and out of form this season. Jack Gunson's had a huge year. Absolutely massive year. You want to talk about underrated players in the competition at the moment. He's right up there. Obviously, Ginnivan's had his spells in the VFL to kind of help him get back on track. Nick Watson's had up and down games as well. But right now, it's not hurting them. They're not in bad form. They're one of the most informed teams in the competition. And they continue to win games.
Yeah.
I think there's more scoring output to come from the Hawks. So doing what they need to do, doing the required. But I think this is one of the teams that you look at and think, potentially a couple more games, just bump up that average as the season goes on.
And we keep forgetting, like, the Hawks. We don't keep forgetting. We mention it pretty much every week. The Hawks are still a young, up-and-coming side. They've still got a lot of growth left in them. So it's going to be pretty scary.
Their forward line's quite experienced. You look at Bruce, look at Gunston, look at Chol.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
Cal Shadir coming back soon as well. I think that will help too. I really have a lot of time for Cal Shadir. I think he's a potential missing link for the Hawks. I think he came back via the VFL on the weekend. So big promising signs for the Hawks if they can get him back in and in some of that form you're showing at the halfway point of last year. That all ties together. Expect to see a few more big scoring games from the Hollywood Hawks.
I can't wait to play them. All right, let's move on to the next game. We have the Demons.
Yeah, 1 game under 60 points for Melbourne, 2 games over 90. Fremantle being one of those, of course, in the game where both sides managed to score over 90 points. So for Melbourne here, it just reflects where they are at the moment. They haven't completely fallen apart like they were probably looking like they were about to at one stage. But they're also not really getting... I mean, the 3 teams they've beaten, Fremantle identity crisis. Richmond, and frankly, they were clinging on at the end against Richmond. And then West Coast in a game that, for the most part, was in the balance. Yeah. I felt.
Yeah.
Not great for Melbourne. And right now, their biggest issue is their forward line. Van Rooyen, Fritsch have spent time in the VFL. they've chopped and changed. Guys like Melksham have had chances to be the forward. Turner's had the chance to be the biggest forward at times. Johnson's been in that setup as well. So a lot of chopping and changing. Question marks over Cosy Pickett's future. Question marks over Bailey Fritch's future. Unsure where this goes for Melbourne as the season and the years develop.
Yeah, they're an interesting one because, when you look at Fritsch and Van Rooyen, not being able to get a spot in the first team is saying something, because Fritsch for a long time...
Well, they were woefully out of form.
Well, of course, but even then, who else are they bringing in? I'm not too sure how deep their pockets go. I don't think they're very deep. But if you're having to send those two down to get some form back in, that's pretty dire. But we'll see where the Demons go. Jesse, let's move on to Kangas. Same.
Identical results for North. One under 62 over 90 for North. I don't know how I feel about this stat for North Melbourne, Liam, because they can score.
Mm-hmm.
We know they can score. But have they got a style that actually allows them to dictate a game yet? I don't feel that way.
No. They were looking like they were moving towards that at the start of the year, and then that's kind of gone over the last month or so.
It's a worry for me with North. They've managed to score kind of over 60 points when they've been smashed, which I think is a positive, because they're not hopeless going forward like they have been in recent seasons at times, especially when Larky's been in and out of form. He's not had everything go his way. They've had no other options at points in the last few years. So things are trending in the right direction for North. They've minimised that bottom end despite having a tough year. So we'll see where this goes for North. Hopefully they can start getting some more points on the board and, kicking up some premiership points. I think that's what they really need to do.
Absolutely they do. Let's go to the next team, the Power.
Power 3 under 63 over 90. Port and Carlton for me are the two sides that you can just about jam together and put like a little pool noodle around and then tie it tightly because they're just floating in. Are they on the beach already? In terms of, they're not going to be bottom 4. They're not going to be top 8. They just ironically, they're on St Kilda Beach, which is that actual beach. So that works out really well. We can actually name it that too. Probably actually call it Port Beach, because that's a beach in Fremantle, who are also apparently on the beach this year.
Yeah, there we go. Everyone's good. Well, maybe that's the problem.
This is turning into Lonely Planet here. We're naming half the beaches in Australia.
And famously, if there's a football team on a beach, no good.
Who?
Well, Freo, Port.
Gold Coast, lots of beaches.
That's true. Good point. Good point. All right, moving on, Jesse. Come on.
Geelong's kind of near a coast.
Is it? I suppose so. All right. So I was wrong.
And you were wrong, and Port are confused this season, because when they've been bad, much like Carlton, they have been rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
But when they've been free-flowing, they've been almost electric at times.
Oh.
And they've been able to dominate opposition. I think when you look at Port Adelaide, so much of their fortunes are tied to Miss Georgiades.
Yeah.
So much of their quality in that forward line depends on whether Georgiades is off or on. If he's on, Port are on, and he brings teammates into the game. But if he's off, if things are going his way, defenders are clearly in his head, he's not getting the better of his matchup, there's not a lot of other options at the moment for Port. I still don't think even Georgiades has filled that Charlie Dixon COVID era void that they've got. And that's a long way back, because they've tried different things. They brought in Jeremy Finlayson to play a key role in the forward line. That hasn't really worked, I don't feel. They've kind of tinkered around the edge. They were really hopeful that Marshall and Georgiades could lead that charge, for various reasons. I don't think that's worked. So, difficult for Port. And, if they're not able to get consistent football, at least semi-consistent football, on a weekly basis, we're going to see more games like this, more results like the weekend, and difficulty making the finals.
All right, let's move on, Jesse, because I realise we're 45 minutes in. We've still got so many teams to go.
We are. Richmond, 2 games under 60, 1 game over 90. So the Tigers, when they've been poor, but yet they've managed to eke out results too. So for the Tigers, given their forward line is an old Tom Lynch who can't hit a set shot, and children, they're doing pretty well in that regard to get a game over 90. And, they have shown an ability to get midfielders to bridge up and score as well. So interesting to see where the Tigers can go with this, because that is probably the worst result we've had so far on paper, which doesn't really reflect the way the Tigers have played this year, interestingly enough.
No, but like you said, Tom Lynch and children, they can only go up from here.
Yeah.
And you give this a couple of years, and the Tigers are going to be just fine. I think. Obviously not this year. All they can do is just get some blood in the system and get the kids a few games, and then see where it goes from there. I don't think there's much to say. We can't pick them apart. Let's move on. Boom.
St Kilda 1 under 63 over 90. Gee,
this isn't Ross Ball at all.
This is Lost Ryan. Because he's very confused. But no, we talked about this last week. The Saints are clearly trying to play a more attractive brand of football to help make the club more attractive themselves. They need to keep Wangeli Miller, and the noise is getting louder that he's really considering those South Australian offers. Apparently, we're going to see Zach Butters available. That's a big option that St Kilda need to consider. There's talks. Bont hasn't re-signed yet.
Oh, that'd be a coup.
Well, that's the thing. They've got the money. There's just about no one in the competition the Saints couldn't afford right now. The question is, do you want to play for St Kilda? And that's held them back an infinite amount of times in the last 10, 15 years. I get the sense this is more of a marketing season than it is an actual on-field performance season. And right now, the marketing's starting to work. There's a little bit more buzz around the Saints than there has been in recent years.
Fair shout. Hard to argue. It's not really that boring football that we used to see, the defensive stuff. A lot more, I mean, big scalps too, like Geelong and I was going to say Freo.
No.
Geelong.
Yeah.
All right, let's go next game. Next team.
Boring football's just moved one spot down the alphabetical ladder here. Sydney, no games under 60 points, just the one game over 90 points. But this is the problem. You look at clubs just can't score.
Mm.
And this is Sydney embodied. Their win-loss record, yes, they won on Sunday in the Battle of the Bridge, but was that more to do with them or just with a complete wheels falling off from the Giants? I think more the latter, to be honest. They're just offering nothing at the moment, Liam. And you talk about teams that are just directionless.
It's pretty.
What are Sydney this year?
It's pretty startling when you see that actually only one game over 90 points. Obviously, none under 60 is okay, which means they're obviously, within that 10 goal plus mark. And you've said that before, you can score, as long as you're scoring 12 or 13 goals this year, you should be in with a chance.
You're in with a chance.
But obviously just the 1 over 90 shows that, the scoring prowess that you were speaking about throughout the season, it just isn't there. It's just not there. And the stats show it. The stats show. Shall we? Next one, Jesse?
Next one.
Wiggles.
West Coast, potentially unsurprisingly, the worst team that we'll cover in terms of these metrics. 3 games under 60 points this season. 0 games over 90. Look, this is a real worry for West Coast because you look at their forward line, it's arguably the strongest part of their field on paper. Jake Waterman, probably their best player at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar Allen, and I know he's been horrifically out of form. I know that. I'm talking about on paper. Ryan, very, very capable forward. JD Cripps is having a good year and has remained consistent.
Yep.
I think it's better than other parts of the field for West Coast. And yet right now, 3 games under 60 points, almost half your games. Well, that's a real problem.
If the mids aren't getting the ball down there, Jesse, it's going to be very hard to score, isn't it?
It is.
I think that might be the big problem. Because, the Eagles as well, like Waterman's, he's accurate. Cripps is obviously deadly accurate as well. Like, they've got good forwards and good accuracy down there, but...
Even throw Archer Reid in this conversation.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's just the problem of it getting down there, I think, for the Eagles more than anything else, which is, it's probably where their massive issues lie for mine. But, look, 3 games under 60. Yeah. I mean, obviously, Freo didn't do that well on the weekend, but when you see a score under 50, under 60, a lot of the times you're like, what's going on? What are these guys doing? And most of the time you see it's like a wet game. You're like, oh, that makes sense. But the Eagles haven't had many of those. It's been all clear all the time. Under the lights of Marvel. Beautiful footy conditions in Perth. What's the excuse? Young team. Bad midfield. Let's move on, Jesse.
Last game before we head over to the round that was Western Bulldogs. No games under 60 points, 5 games over 90 points. And crucially for the Dogs, a lot of consecutive games in that over 90 points. They're starting to find their form. They're starting to find their feet. They're starting to find their paws because they're Bulldogs. I guess.
Yeah, sure.
They're flying. they continue to go for form like this, you're going to have to score over 90 points to beat them. Not many been able to do that this year.
Not at all. I love watching the Bulldogs this year. I love watching the Bulldogs
Are we almost saying fun Bulldogs win?
I nearly did that, actually. I thought we might have to change it. Fun Bulldogs.
They have to do a new one for Hawthorn, or just make up a new one for the Dogs.
Okay, we'll workshop it, Jesse.
Okay.
When we get to the games later on, maybe we'll come up with something by then. It'll be a really brief workshop, but hey, we'll see how we go.
Who let the fun out? Okay.
Done.
The whole thing about workshops is you can throw out all your crap ideas at the start and you don't have to pick it.
That's true.
It's fine.
That is true. But no, the Bulldogs have been formidable this year. They've been really, really good to watch. Norton's coming back through again. Obviously, Darcy, before he went down, was killing everybody up forward as well. Bont's come back and started kicking goals like a madman. They've got all the, Kennedy, he's come in. He's doing some good stuff up forward as well.